Maya's phone buzzed at the worst possible moment. She was standing outside the restaurant, her hand frozen on the door handle, when the message from her father flashed across the screen. Her heart began to race before she even read the words. Something felt wrong tonight, and she could not explain why. She had almost canceled this blind date 3 times. Her coworker Grace had begged her to give it a chance, promising that the man waiting inside was kind, funny, and nothing like the disasters from her past. Maya took a deep breath, pushed the door open, and stepped into the warm light of the restaurant, unaware that her life was about to change in a way she never could have predicted. The restaurant smelled of garlic and fresh bread, soft music played in the background, and candles flickered on every table. Maya scanned the room until her eyes landed on a man sitting near the window. He stood up as soon as he saw her, his smile wide and genuine. "You must be Maya," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Daniel." Maya smiled back, though her nerves had not settled. "That's me. Sorry if I'm a little late." "You're right on time," Daniel said, pulling out her chair. "I was starting to think I'd been stood up." They sat down, and for a moment, everything felt normal. Daniel had an easy way of talking, the kind that made silence feel comfortable instead of awkward. He asked about her job at the design firm, and she found herself laughing at his jokes about his terrible attempts at cooking. The tension in her shoulders began to melt away, but Maya's mind kept drifting back to the message from her father. Richard had been strange lately, more secretive than usual. Ever since her mother passed away 3 years ago, he had thrown himself into work, avoiding anything that resembled moving on. Then, 2 months ago, everything changed. He started smiling again. He started humming old songs while making coffee. And last week, he had finally told her the truth. "I've met someone," he had said, his eyes bright with a kind of hope Maya had not seen in years. "Her name is Elena. I think you'll like her." Maya had not known what to say. Part of her wanted her father to be happy. Another part of her felt like the ground beneath her was shifting, like the memory of her mother was being quietly replaced. She had agreed to meet Elena soon, though she had not set a date yet, unsure if she was ready. "You seem distracted," Daniel said, pulling her attention back to the table. "Everything okay?" "Sorry," Maya said, shaking her head. "Family stuff. My dad is seeing someone new, and I haven't met her yet. It's a lot to process." Daniel's expression softened. "That sounds difficult. How long has it been since your mom passed?" 3 years, Maya said quietly. "I want him to be happy. I really do. But it's strange, thinking about someone else stepping into that space." "I get that more than you might think," Daniel said. "My mom went through something similar after my dad left. She spent years alone before she finally opened up to someone new. It took me a long time to accept it, but eventually I saw how much happier she was." Maya nodded, appreciating that he understood without making her feel small for her feelings. The conversation shifted, lighter topics filling the space between them. They talked about travel, about the terrible reality shows they secretly enjoyed, about the strange coincidence of both growing up in the same small town before moving to the city for work. As the waiter brought their appetizers, Daniel's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen, and his smile faded slightly. "Sorry, do you mind if I take this? It's my mom. She usually only calls if something's wrong." "Go ahead," Maya said, gesturing for him to answer. Daniel stepped a few feet away from the table, his back turned toward Maya as he spoke in a low voice. Maya sipped her water and glanced around the restaurant, trying not to eavesdrop, though snippets of his conversation reached her anyway. "Mom, slow down," Daniel said. "What do you mean he wants to introduce me? Tonight? I'm actually on a date right now." Maya's ears perked up slightly at the word date, but she quickly told herself it was nothing. Plenty of people were on dates tonight. It was a coincidence, nothing more. Daniel laughed softly at something his mother said, then his voice dropped again. Okay. Tell him I'll try to stop by after. I promise I'm happy for you both. Just give me some time to process it, all right? Love you too." He ended the call and returned to the table, running a hand through his hair with a slightly embarrassed smile. "Sorry about that," he said, sitting back down. "My mom just started dating someone new too, if you can believe it. Apparently things are getting serious fast. He wants to meet me tonight, but I told her I already had plans." Maya smiled, though something about the conversation tugged at the edges of her mind. "It sounds like we're in similar situations. Parents finding new love later in life." "Exactly," Daniel said. It's strange watching your parent become someone new again. My mom hasn't smiled this much in years. I should probably be more supportive about it, but it still catches me off guard sometimes. What's her name? Maya asked, more out of polite curiosity than anything else, though a small, strange feeling had begun to settle in her stomach. Elena, Daniel said, reaching for his glass of water. She's been through a lot, but she deserves to be happy. Maya's hand froze halfway to her fork. The restaurant noise around her seemed to fade into a dull hum. She stared at Daniel, waiting for him to notice something was wrong, but he simply continued eating, unaware of the storm building inside her. Elena, Maya repeated slowly. That's an interesting name. Yeah, she's originally from a small town a few hours from here, Daniel said. Moved to the city for work, years ago, just like us. Why, do you know an Elena? Maya's throat tightened. She thought about the photo her father had shown her the week before, a picture of a woman with warm brown eyes and a soft smile, standing beside her father at some community event. She thought about the way her father's voice had cracked slightly when he said her name, full of nervous hope. I might, Maya said carefully, setting down her fork. Does your mom happen to know a man named Richard? Daniel's expression shifted immediately, confusion crossing his face. How do you know that? The question hung in the air between them, heavy and impossible to ignore. Maya felt her pulse quicken, her mind racing through the pieces now clicking into place with terrifying clarity. The man her father wanted Daniel to meet tonight, the new relationship moving fast. The name Elena. Because Richard is my father, Maya said slowly, watching Daniel's face carefully, and I think your mother might be the woman he's been telling me about for the past 2 months. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The restaurant continued around them, waiters weaving between tables, laughter drifting from a nearby booth, completely oblivious to the quiet earthquake happening at their table. Daniel set down his glass, his eyes wide with disbelief. That's not possible, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. What are the odds? I don't know, Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper, but it would explain why my dad wanted to introduce me to Elena's son tonight too. He mentioned something about wanting all of us to meet soon. I didn't think it would happen like this. Daniel pulled out his phone again, his fingers moving quickly as he searched through something. After a moment, he turned the screen toward Maya. It was a photo of his mother, smiling brightly, standing next to a man Maya recognized instantly. Her stomach dropped. It was her father. The same jacket he always wore to formal events. The same crinkled smile lines around his eyes. There was no mistaking him. That's him, Maya said, her voice shaking slightly. That's my dad. Daniel stared at the photo, then back at Maya, his expression a mixture of shock and something that almost resembled amusement, though neither of them felt like laughing yet. So let me get this straight, Daniel said slowly. My mother is dating your father, and somehow, without either of them knowing, you and I ended up on a blind date together. It seems that way, Maya said, pressing her fingers against her temples, as if trying to physically hold her thoughts together. This has to be some kind of joke. Did Grace know about this? Did she set this up on purpose? I doubt it, Daniel said. My friend Owen set this up. I don't think either of them could have known. This has to be a coincidence. An impossible one, but a coincidence. Maya let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding, a strange, nervous laugh escaping her lips, despite the chaos swirling in her chest. This is insane. Out of every person in this city, I end up on a date with the son of the woman who might become my stepmother, and I end up with the daughter of the man my mother is falling for, Daniel added, shaking his head in disbelief. This is either the strangest coincidence in history, or the universe has a very strange sense of humor. Maya glanced down at the table, her appetizer forgotten, her mind spinning with questions she did not know how to answer. What did this mean for the rest of the evening? Should she leave immediately, tell her father everything, pretend this dinner never happened? Or was there something else here, something worth exploring despite how complicated it had suddenly become? Daniel seemed to be wrestling with the same uncertainty, his eyes searching hers for some sign of what to do next. The comfortable ease from earlier in the evening had been replaced by a tension neither of them had expected, a question mark hanging over everything they had said and felt in the past hour. Do you want to leave? Daniel asked quietly. I completely understand if this feels too strange to continue. Maya considered the question carefully. Leaving would be the easy choice, the safe choice. She could go home, call her father, demand answers, and pretend this dinner had been nothing more than an unfortunate mix-up. But something about the way Daniel looked at her, patient and unbothered by the chaos of the situation, made her hesitate. "No," she said finally, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "I don't want to leave. I think we should finish dinner. We can figure out the rest later." Daniel's shoulders relaxed slightly, a small smile returning to his face. "Are you sure? Because this is about to get very complicated for both of us." "I'm sure," Maya said, picking her fork back up. "Besides, if our parents are really falling for each other, I think we owe it to them to at least be civil, even if this whole situation is completely ridiculous." They continued their meal, though the conversation had shifted into something more cautious, both of them now aware of the strange thread connecting their families together. Maya found herself studying Daniel more closely, searching for traces of Elena in his features, wondering what kind of woman had captured her father's heart after years of grief. Outside the restaurant window, the city lights flickered against the darkening sky, indifferent to the quiet storm brewing between two strangers who had just discovered they were bound together in a way neither of them had chosen. Maya glanced at her phone one more time, staring at her father's unread message, knowing that whatever waited for her at home would only be the beginning of a much longer, more complicated story. For now, she set the phone face down on the table and looked up at Daniel, who was watching her with a mixture of curiosity and quiet warmth. "So," she said, forcing a small smile onto her face, despite the uncertainty swirling inside her. "Tell me more about your mother. I have a feeling I'm about to know her very well." Daniel laughed softly, shaking his head at the strangeness of it all. "Only if you tell me about your father. Something tells me our families are about to become very tangled together, whether we're ready for it or not." Neither of them could have known, as they sat there trying to process the impossible coincidence that had brought them together, just how tangled things would truly become in the weeks ahead. Maya barely slept that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of the dinner in her mind, trying to make sense of a coincidence that felt too strange to be real. By the time morning light crept through her curtains, she had already decided what she needed to do. She needed answers, and she needed them from her father directly. She arrived at Richard's house just after 9 in the morning, still wearing the same clothes from the night before, her hair pulled back in a rushed ponytail. Richard opened the door with a coffee mug in hand, his eyebrows raising in surprise at the sight of his daughter standing on the porch so early. "Maya, is everything all right?" he asked, stepping aside to let her in. "You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't," Maya said, walking past him into the kitchen. "Dad, we need to talk about Elena." Richard's expression shifted immediately, a flicker of nervousness crossing his face. He set his mug down on the counter and folded his arms, bracing himself for whatever was coming. "Okay," he said slowly. "What about her? Does she have a son named Daniel?" Maya asked, watching her father's face carefully. Richard blinked, clearly caught off guard by the question. "Yes, she does. How did you know that? I haven't even mentioned him to you yet." Maya let out a short, disbelieving laugh, running her hands through her hair. "Because I went on a blind date with him last night. My coworker set it up weeks ago, long before any of this started. Neither of us had any idea our parents were dating, until his phone rang in the middle of dinner." For a long moment, Richard simply stared at his daughter, processing the information slowly. Then, unexpectedly, a small laugh escaped him, though it quickly faded when he saw the seriousness in Maya's eyes. "That's an incredible coincidence," he said, shaking his head. "I had no idea. Elena mentioned she wanted Daniel to meet me soon, but she never said anything about him already being out with someone." "Well, now you know," Maya said, leaning against the counter. "What I want to understand is why you didn't tell me more about this relationship sooner. You mentioned Elena's name once, showed me a photo, and that was it. I didn't even know she had a son until last night." Richard sighed, rubbing the back of his neck the way he always did when he felt cornered. "I wanted to take things slowly with you, Maya. I know how hard the past 3 years have been. I didn't want to overwhelm you with details before I was sure this relationship meant something real." "And does it?" Maya asked, her voice softer now. "Mean something real, I mean." "Yes," Richard said without hesitation. Elena makes me happier than I've felt in years. I know that might be hard for you to hear, especially with everything still fresh from losing your mother, but it's the truth. Maya nodded slowly, absorbing his words. She understood, in theory, why her father deserved happiness. But understanding something logically and feeling it emotionally were two very different things, and the added complication of Daniel made everything feel even more tangled than before. "There's something else," Maya said, choosing her words carefully. "Daniel and we didn't just have an awkward dinner and go our separate ways. We talked. A lot. And I think I want to see him again, even knowing everything now." Richard's eyebrows lifted, surprise evident on his face. "You want to keep seeing him? Even though this means our families would be tangled together in more ways than one?" "I don't know what it means yet," Maya admitted. "But I liked him, Dad. Before I found out who his mother was, before any of this complicated mess started, I genuinely enjoyed talking to him. I don't want to throw that away just because the situation is unusual." Richard studied his daughter for a long moment, something like understanding softening his features. Elena mentioned wanting to have a dinner soon, to introduce everyone properly. Maybe that would be a good place to start, formally, without any more surprises. "Maybe," Maya said, though uncertainty lingered in her voice. "I just worry about how this looks. What if people think it's strange, us dating while you and Elena are getting serious? What if it puts pressure on your relationship with her?" "Let me worry about that," Richard said gently. "Elena is a reasonable woman. I think once she understands the situation, she'll want to figure out the best way forward too. We're all adults here, Maya. We can handle complicated situations with honesty and patience." Maya wanted to believe him, but a small knot of anxiety remained lodged in her chest. She thought about her mother, about the life they had built as a family before everything changed. She wondered what her mother would think about all of this, about her father moving forward with someone new, about her own complicated feelings toward Daniel. Later that afternoon, Maya received a text message from Daniel, asking if she wanted to meet for coffee, to discuss their strange situation further. She agreed, grateful for the chance to see him again, outside the chaos of the previous night's discovery. They met at a small cafe near the edge of downtown, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop. Daniel was already seated at a corner table when Maya arrived, 2 cups of coffee waiting on the table between them. "I took a guess on your order," he said as she sat down. "Hope you like caramel." "It's perfect," Maya said, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "I talked to my dad this morning. He confirmed everything. Elena really is the woman he's been seeing." "I talked to my mom too," Daniel said. "She was just as shocked as we were. Apparently she's been wanting to arrange a dinner for weeks, but kept pushing it back because she wasn't sure how to bring it up with me." "Small world," Maya said, managing a small smile despite the strangeness of it all. "Too small, honestly," Daniel replied, laughing softly. "So where does this leave us? Because I meant what I said last night. I don't want to pretend I didn't enjoy our date just because it turns out we're connected in this unexpected way." Maya studied him for a moment, appreciating his honesty. "I don't want to pretend either, but I think we need to be careful. If we decide to keep seeing each other, it needs to be something real, not just something we're doing out of curiosity, because of the coincidence." "Agreed," Daniel said. "I like you, Maya. Not because our parents happen to be dating, but because you're funny, and smart, and you didn't run out of that restaurant the moment things got complicated. That says a lot about a person." Maya felt warmth spread through her chest at his words, a feeling she had not expected to experience so soon after the chaos of the previous night. "I like you too, but I think we should keep this between us for a little while, at least until we figure out how to navigate everything with our parents." "Keep it a secret?" Daniel asked, raising an eyebrow. "Not exactly a secret," Maya clarified. "Just private, for now. I don't want Elena thinking I'm only interested in getting close to you because of my dad's relationship with her. And I don't want my dad thinking you're only interested in me because of his relationship with your mom. I want us to have a chance to figure out what this is without extra pressure." Daniel nodded slowly, considering her request. "That makes sense. Though I have a feeling our parents are going to want that introduction dinner sooner rather than later. Elena has been talking about it non-stop." "My dad mentioned the same thing," Maya said, sighing. "I guess we'll have to face everyone eventually. Let's just try to enjoy figuring this out on our own terms first, before the family drama officially begins." Over the next 2 weeks, Maya and Daniel found themselves spending more time together, carefully keeping their growing connection away from their parents' knowledge. They met for lunch during work breaks, took long walks along the river after sunset, and exchanged text messages filled with small jokes and observations about their day. Maya found herself smiling at her phone more often than she had in years, a lightness returning to her life that she had almost forgotten was possible. But keeping secrets, especially in families that were growing closer by the day, rarely lasted long. Elena had grown suspicious of her son's frequent absences and distracted energy, noticing the way he checked his phone more often, the way he seemed happier than usual without any clear explanation. She decided to ask him directly one evening, while helping him prepare dinner at his apartment. "You've been different lately," Elena said, chopping vegetables at the counter. "Happier. Are you seeing someone?" Daniel hesitated, caught off guard by his mother's directness. "Maybe," he admitted carefully. "It's still new. I wasn't ready to talk about it yet." "New is good," Elena said, smiling. "Tell me about her. What's her name?" Daniel's hesitation deepened, the weight of the secret pressing against his chest. He knew he could not lie to his mother, not about something this significant, especially knowing how quickly the truth would eventually surface anyway. "Mom, there's something you need to know," he said slowly. "It's Maya, Richard's daughter." Elena's hands stilled on the cutting board, her expression shifting through several emotions in quick succession, confusion giving way to surprise, then something that resembled worry. "Maya? Richard's Maya? The one he's been wanting me to meet?" "The same one," Daniel confirmed. "We met on a blind date, weeks ago, before either of us knew about you and Richard. It was a complete coincidence." Elena set down her knife, pressing her palms against the counter as she processed the information. "This is unexpected. How long has this been going on?" "A few weeks," Daniel said. "We wanted to keep it quiet until we figured things out ourselves. We didn't want to add more complications to your relationship with Richard." Elena's brow furrowed with concern, her thoughts clearly spinning through the implications of what her son had just revealed. "Daniel, this is exactly the kind of complication I was worried about. Richard and I are just starting to build something real together. If things get messy between you and Maya, it could affect all of us." "Nothing has to get messy," Daniel said, though uncertainty crept into his voice. "We really like each other, Mom. This isn't some casual thing we're doing without thinking it through." Elena sighed, rubbing her temples as she leaned against the counter. "I'm not saying you shouldn't see her. I just worry about how fragile new relationships can be, especially when so many people are involved. What if things don't work out between you two? It could make things incredibly awkward for Richard and me." "And what if things do work out?" Daniel countered gently. "Isn't that worth considering too?" Elena did not have an immediate answer, her expression torn between hope and worry. She thought about Richard, about the careful, patient way their relationship had grown over the past few months, about how much she treasured the second chance at love she had found with him. The idea of anything threatening that stability frightened her more than she wanted to admit. "I think we need to tell Richard and Maya that we know," Elena said finally. "No more secrets. If this is really something serious between you two, it needs to be out in the open, handled properly, with everyone's feelings considered." Daniel nodded reluctantly, knowing his mother was right, even as anxiety settled into his stomach at the thought of the conversation ahead. He picked up his phone and sent Maya a message, letting her know that their secret had reached its end, and that a family conversation was now unavoidable. Across the city, Maya's phone buzzed with Daniel's message just as she was finishing dinner with her father. She read the text twice, her stomach tightening with nervous anticipation. She looked up at Richard, who was watching her curiously from across the table. "Everything okay?" he asked. Maya set her phone down slowly, taking a deep breath before answering. "Dad, I need to tell you something, and I think it's time we finally had that dinner with Elena and Daniel. All of us together, no more waiting." Richard's expression grew serious, sensing the shift in his daughter's tone. "What's going on, Maya?" "Daniel and I have been seeing each other," Maya admitted, watching her father's face carefully for his reaction. "For a few weeks now. We wanted to keep it private until we understood our own feelings, but Elena knows now too. I think it's time we stopped hiding things from each other." Richard sat back in his chair, absorbing the revelation slowly. A mixture of surprise, concern, and something almost like amusement crossed his features as he processed the news. "Well," he said finally, a small, tired smile forming on his lips. I suppose our families were destined to become complicated no matter what happened. Are you upset? Maya asked cautiously. Not upset, Richard said, though his tone carried a note of uncertainty. Just surprised at how quickly things have moved. I think it's time we all sat down together, Maya. All four of us. No more secrets, no more surprises. We need to figure out how to move forward as a family, whatever that ends up looking like. Maya nodded, relief mixing with anxiety in equal measure. She knew the conversation ahead would not be simple, that emotions on all sides were tangled together in ways that could easily lead to conflict. But she also knew, deep down, that hiding from the truth any longer would only make things worse. The time had come to bring everything into the open, whatever the consequences might be. That night, as Maya lay in bed staring at the ceiling once again, she thought about the strange, impossible way her life had changed over the past few weeks. A simple blind date had unraveled into something far more complicated than she ever could have imagined, tangling her future with a family she had never expected to become part of. She thought about Daniel, about the warmth in his voice when he spoke to her, about the quiet courage it had taken for both of them to keep pursuing something real despite the chaos surrounding it. Whatever happened next, she knew there was no turning back now. The truth was out, and soon, all four of them would have to sit across from one another and decide what kind of family they wanted to become. The dinner was set for Saturday evening, at a quiet restaurant Elena had chosen because of its private back room, away from the noise and distraction of the main dining area. Maya arrived early, her nerves twisting into knots as she waited alone at the table, watching the door for any sign of the others. She had rehearsed a dozen different versions of what she might say, though none of them felt right once she imagined actually saying them out loud. Richard arrived next, dressed more formally than usual, his hands slightly unsteady as he adjusted his tie before sitting down beside his daughter. He offered her a reassuring smile, though Maya could see the same nervous energy reflected in his eyes. "You look nice," he said, trying to ease the tension. "Ready for this?" "Not really," Maya admitted, managing a small, tired laugh. "But I don't think waiting any longer would have made it easier." A few minutes later, the door to the private room opened, and Elena walked in, followed closely by Daniel. Maya's breath caught slightly at the sight of him, a small wave of comfort washing over her despite the tension of the evening. Elena, elegant in a deep green dress, offered Richard a warm smile before turning her attention to Maya. "You must be Maya," Elena said, extending her hand. "I've heard so much about you. I'm sorry it's taken this long for us to finally meet properly." "It's nice to meet you too," Maya said, shaking her hand, studying the woman who had captured her father's heart. Elena's eyes were kind, though Maya could sense the same nervous energy in her that she felt in herself. They settled into their seats, an awkward silence falling over the table as everyone processed the strange reality of their shared situation. Richard cleared his throat, attempting to break the tension. "Well," he said, glancing around the table, "I think we can all agree this isn't exactly how any of us imagined this evening going." Elena laughed softly, the sound easing some of the stiffness in the room. "That's certainly true, though I suppose there are worse ways for our families to become connected. Or better ways, depending on how you look at it," Daniel added, glancing at Maya with a small smile that made her stomach flutter despite the tension surrounding them. The waiter arrived to take their orders, giving everyone a brief reprieve from the heavy conversation ahead. Once he left, Richard turned serious again, folding his hands on the table. "I think we should be honest with each other tonight," he said. "About everything. Our relationship, Maya and Daniel's relationship, and how we all feel about where things stand." Elena nodded in agreement, though her expression carried a flicker of worry. "I agree. I think honesty is the only way we're going to navigate this successfully. I'll start, if that's all right." Everyone turned their attention to her, waiting as she gathered her thoughts. "When Richard and I started dating, I never imagined our children would end up connected in this way," Elena began. "I was cautious at first, worried about moving too fast, worried about how it might affect Daniel. But watching him with Maya these past few weeks, I've seen a happiness in him I haven't seen in a long time. That said, I would be lying if I said I wasn't nervous about how quickly everything has unfolded." Maya listened carefully, appreciating Elena's honesty, even as anxiety tightened in her chest. She glanced at her father, who was watching Elena with quiet affection, before speaking up herself. I think I understand that fear, Maya said. Honestly, when I found out who Daniel's mother was, my first instinct was to panic. It felt like too much, too fast, too complicated. But the more time I've spent with him, the more I've realized that what we have isn't something I want to walk away from just because of how strange the circumstances are. Richard reached over and gently squeezed his daughter's hand, pride evident in his expression. I feel the same way about Elena, he said, turning to look at her. I never expected to fall in love again after losing my wife. It felt impossible for a long time, but Elena brought something back into my life that I thought I'd lost forever, and I'm not willing to let complications scare me away from that. Elena's eyes softened at his words, though the conversation was far from finished. Daniel cleared his throat, glancing between his mother and Maya's father before speaking. I think what we all need to figure out is how to move forward without putting unfair pressure on Maya and me, he said. Our relationship shouldn't be dependent on whether things work out between the two of you, and your relationship shouldn't be dependent on us either. We need to give each other room to build things naturally, without forcing anything. Phil. The table fell quiet for a moment, everyone considering his words carefully. Maya felt a surge of gratitude toward Daniel, for voicing something she had been struggling to articulate herself. That makes sense, Richard said slowly, though I think it's natural for all of us to worry about how our choices might affect each other. We're not just dating anymore, are we? We've become tangled together as a family, whether we intended to or not. The waiter returned with their food, offering a brief pause in the conversation. As they began eating, the mood shifted slightly, small talk filling the space between more serious discussions. Elena asked Maya about her work at the design firm, genuinely curious about her creative projects, while Richard and Daniel discovered a shared interest in old films, launching into an animated discussion about classic movies neither Maya nor Elena had seen. For a while, things felt almost normal, the four of them settling into an unexpected rhythm despite the complicated web connecting their lives. But as dessert arrived, the conversation shifted into more difficult territory, one that Maya had been quietly dreading since the evening began. Maya, Elena said gently, setting down her fork. I hope you know I would never try to replace your mother. I understand how difficult this must be for you, watching your father move forward with someone new. If you ever feel uncomfortable, I want you to know you can always talk to me honestly. Maya's throat tightened unexpectedly at Elena's words, old grief rising to the surface despite her best efforts to keep it contained. She had not expected the conversation to touch on her mother so directly, and the sudden vulnerability caught her off guard. Thank you for saying that, Maya said quietly, blinking back unexpected tears. It's been hard, watching my dad move on, not because I don't want him to be happy, but because it feels like another piece of her slipping away. Does that make sense? It makes complete sense, Elena said gently. Grief doesn't follow a schedule, and it doesn't disappear just because new happiness enters your life. I lost my husband years ago, under very different circumstances, but I understand what it feels like to watch someone you love move forward while a part of you still holds on to what was lost. Richard reached for his daughter's hand again, his own eyes glistening slightly. Your mother will always be part of this family, Maya. Nothing about my relationship with Elena changes that. I loved your mother, with everything I had, and that love doesn't disappear just because I've found happiness again. I hope you can understand that, even if it takes time. Maya nodded, wiping quickly at her eyes, embarrassed by the sudden display of emotion in front of everyone. Daniel reached over discreetly and squeezed her hand under the table, a small gesture of support that steadied her more than she expected. I think, Maya said, taking a deep breath, that I've been so focused on protecting the memory of my mom that I haven't given myself permission to be happy about new things entering our lives. That's not fair to you, Dad, or to you, Elena. I want to try harder to embrace this, even if it's difficult sometimes. Elena smiled warmly, reaching across the table to briefly touch Maya's hand. Take all the time you need. Grief and happiness can exist together, even when it feels complicated. I'm not asking you to replace anything. I just hope, in time, we can build something meaningful together, as a family. The conversation lightened after that, the heaviness of the moment gradually easing into something softer, more hopeful. Richard shared a funny story about Maya's childhood that made everyone laugh, breaking the last remnants of tension in the room. Elena talked about Daniel's stubborn refusal to eat vegetables as a child, teasing him mercilessly while he groaned in embarrassment. By the time the evening ended, something had shifted between the four of them. The awkwardness that had colored the beginning of dinner had transformed into something resembling comfort, a fragile but genuine sense of connection forming between two families, brought together through the strangest of coincidences. As they said their goodbyes outside the restaurant, Richard pulled Elena aside for a quiet moment, while Maya and Daniel lingered near the sidewalk, watching the streetlights flicker on against the darkening sky. "That went better than I expected," Daniel said, glancing at Maya with a relieved smile. "Much better," Maya agreed, "though I think there's still a lot for all of us to figure out. One dinner at a time," Daniel said gently. "We don't have to solve everything tonight." Maya smiled, leaning slightly against him as they waited for their parents to finish their conversation. For the first time since the chaos of their blind date weeks earlier, she felt a sense of calm settle over her, a quiet hope that maybe, despite the strange and complicated circumstances, everything might actually work out the way it was meant to. But calm rarely lasted long in families still learning how to navigate new territory, and within days, a new challenge would arise, one that would test the fragile bonds they had only just begun to build. Richard mentioned, almost casually, over breakfast a few days later, that Elena had brought up the idea of moving in together sooner than either Maya or Daniel had anticipated. The news landed heavier than expected, stirring up old anxieties that Maya thought she had already worked through during the dinner. "Moving in together?" Maya repeated, setting down her coffee cup with more force than she intended. "Isn't that fast, Dad? You've only been together a few months." "I know it seems sudden," Richard said carefully, "but at our age, Maya, we don't want to waste time. Elena and I have talked about it extensively. We both feel ready." Maya wanted to be supportive, wanted to trust her father's judgment, but the speed of everything still felt overwhelming. She thought about calling Daniel immediately, wondering if he had heard the same news from his mother, wondering how he felt about the sudden acceleration of their parents' relationship. Later that day, she got her answer when Daniel called her, his voice carrying a similar note of surprise and uncertainty. "Did you hear about the moving-in conversation?" he asked without preamble. "Just this morning," Maya said. "I don't know how I feel about it. It just seems so fast." "I feel the same way," Daniel admitted. "But my mom seems really happy about it. I don't want to be the reason she hesitates on something that could make her genuinely happy." Maya sighed, running a hand through her hair as she paced her living room. "I don't want to hold my dad back either. I just worry about how quickly everything is changing. First the blind date, then finding out our parents are dating, now this. It feels like things are moving faster than any of us can keep up with." "Maybe that's okay," Daniel said gently. "Maybe not everything needs to move at a comfortable pace to still be right. Sometimes the scariest things end up being the best decisions, even if they don't feel that way at first." Maya considered his words carefully, recognizing the truth in them, even as uncertainty lingered in her chest. She thought about her own relationship with Daniel, about how quickly it had developed, despite the impossible circumstances surrounding it, and wondered if perhaps her parents deserved the same grace she had been trying to give herself. "You're right," she said finally. "I think we just need to keep communicating, all four of us. No more surprises, no more secrets. If we can manage that, I think we can handle whatever comes next, even if it moves faster than we're used to." "Agreed," Daniel said. "Whatever happens, we're figuring this out together." As Maya ended the call, she felt a renewed sense of determination settle over her. The path ahead remained uncertain, filled with challenges neither she nor Daniel could fully predict. But for the first time, she felt confident that whatever difficulties arose, they would face them as a united front, together with the family they were slowly, carefully building. The apartment Elena and Richard chose sat on the 8th floor of a quiet building near the park, with wide windows that let in soft afternoon light. Moving day arrived faster than anyone expected, boxes stacked high in the hallway, furniture wrapped in blankets, and the air buzzing with a strange mixture of excitement and nervous energy. Maya had offered to help carry boxes, partly to support her father, and partly because she wanted to spend time with Elena, outside the formality of planned dinners. As they unpacked kitchen boxes together, Elena hummed softly to herself, clearly happy despite the exhausting work. Maya found herself relaxing in her presence, the earlier awkwardness between them slowly fading into something more comfortable. Thank you for helping today, Elena said, wrapping a stack of plates in newspaper. You didn't have to come. I wanted to, Maya said honestly. Besides, I figured someone needed to make sure Dad didn't put the dishes in the wrong cabinets. Elena laughed, the sound warm and genuine. That's probably a fair concern. Richard has already tried organizing the spice rack 3 different ways since this morning. They continued working, the conversation flowing easily between them, touching on small details about their lives, favorite foods, embarrassing childhood memories, the kind of casual conversation that slowly builds real connection over time. Maya found herself genuinely enjoying Elena's company, appreciating her sense of humor and the careful, thoughtful way she spoke about everything, including her relationship with Richard. But later that evening, after most of the boxes had been unpacked and everyone gathered in the newly furnished living room, a knock at the door interrupted the calm atmosphere. Elena answered, her expression shifting into surprise as she opened the door to find her sister Claire standing in the hallway. Claire, I didn't know you were coming by, Elena said, stepping aside to let her in. Claire entered, her eyes sweeping across the room, taking in Richard, Maya, and Daniel, with an expression that Maya could not quite read. Something about her energy felt different from the warmth Elena carried, sharper somehow, more guarded. I heard you moved in with him already, Claire said, her tone carrying an edge that made the room grow quiet. I wanted to see for myself. Elena's smile faltered slightly. Claire, this isn't the time to discuss this. Isn't it? Claire pressed, glancing toward Richard. You've known this man for what, 5 months? And now you're living together, letting his daughter date your son. Doesn't that seem like a lot happening very quickly to anyone else in this room? An uncomfortable silence settled over the apartment. Maya glanced at Daniel, sensing the tension radiating from him as his aunt's words hung in the air, sharp and accusatory. Claire, please, Elena said firmly, though her voice carried a slight tremor. I appreciate your concern, but this is my decision to make. Richard makes me happy, and I trust that happiness, even if it's moved faster than you'd like. I just don't want to see you get hurt again, Claire said, softening slightly, though her worry remained evident. After everything you went through, I worry you're rushing into something without thinking it through properly. And now Daniel is involved with his daughter too? It feels like too much overlap, too much risk if things fall apart. Daniel stepped forward, his jaw tightening slightly. Aunt Claire, I appreciate that you're worried, but Maya and I aren't a risk. We care about each other, and we're being careful about how we handle everything with our parents. Claire studied her nephew for a long moment, her expression softening further, though uncertainty remained visible beneath the surface. I hope you're right, she said quietly. I just don't want anyone in this family getting hurt because things moved too fast without anyone stopping to think clearly. The conversation eventually calmed, Claire staying for a while longer before leaving, with a lingering sense of unresolved tension still hanging over the room. After she left, the apartment fell into an uneasy quiet, everyone processing the confrontation in their own way. That night, after Maya and Daniel left the apartment together, Elena found herself unable to shake the doubt Claire's visit had planted in her mind. She lay awake beside Richard, staring at the ceiling, worry gnawing at the edges of her contentment. The following days brought a noticeable shift in Elena's behavior. She grew quieter during family gatherings, her warmth toward Maya replaced by a careful, guarded distance that Maya could not help but notice. When Daniel mentioned wanting to invite Maya over for dinner one evening, Elena hesitated, offering excuses about being too tired, too busy, needing more time to settle into the new apartment before hosting again. Daniel confronted her about it eventually, cornering her in the kitchen one afternoon, while Richard was out running errands. Mom, is everything okay? You've been distant lately, especially around Maya. Elena sighed, setting down the dish towel she had been holding. I've just been thinking a lot about what Claire said. I don't want either of us to rush into something that could end up hurting all 4 of us if things don't work out. So you want me to stop seeing Maya? Daniel asked, disbelief coloring his voice. I didn't say that, Elena said quickly. I just think maybe we should slow things down, give everyone more space to make sure this is really what we want, before things get even more complicated than they already are. Mom, we've already been together for weeks, Daniel said, frustration creeping into his tone. Slowing down now feels like you're trying to pull us apart because you're scared, not because it's actually the right thing to do. Elena's expression tightened, hurt flickering across her face at her son's words. I'm not trying to pull you apart, Daniel. I'm trying to protect this family. All of us, including you. If things go wrong between you and Maya, it could destroy everything I've built with Richard. Doesn't that concern you at all? It concerns me that you're letting fear control decisions that aren't even yours to make, Daniel said, his voice rising slightly before he caught himself and took a steadying breath. I understand you're scared, Mom. But Maya and I deserve the chance to figure out our own relationship, without you trying to protect us from something that hasn't even happened yet. The conversation ended without resolution, tension lingering between mother and son, in a way that had never existed before. Daniel left the apartment that evening feeling frustrated and unsettled, uncertain how to bridge the growing distance between his mother's fears and his own determination to continue building something real with Maya. Meanwhile, Maya noticed the shift in Elena's behavior too, sensing the growing coldness whenever they crossed paths. She mentioned it to her father one evening, unsure how to interpret the sudden change. Has Elena said anything to you about being upset with me? Maya asked, sitting across from Richard at his kitchen table. Richard frowned, clearly troubled by the question. Not directly, but I've noticed she's been quieter lately. I assumed it was just stress from the move, but maybe there's more going on. I think her sister said something that scared her, Maya said carefully. About things moving too fast, about the risk of everything falling apart if Daniel and I don't work out. Richard's expression grew serious, concern etched into his features. I'll talk to her, Maya. I don't want unnecessary fear to create distance in this family before we've even had a real chance to build something solid together. That night, Richard found Elena sitting alone on their apartment balcony, staring out at the city lights with a troubled expression. He sat beside her quietly, taking her hand gently in his. Talk to me, he said softly. Something's been bothering you for days, and I want to understand what it is. Elena sighed, leaning her head against his shoulder. I'm scared, Richard. Claire's words got into my head, and now I can't stop worrying about what happens if Daniel and Maya's relationship falls apart. What if it creates a rift between our families that we can't repair? What if I lose you because things got too complicated? Richard turned to face her, gently cupping her face in his hands. Elena, nothing about Daniel and Maya's relationship changes how I feel about you. Even if things don't work out between them, that wouldn't affect my commitment to us. Life is unpredictable, and complications will always exist in any family. But letting fear control our choices only pushes away the people we love most. Elena's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she absorbed his words, the weight of her worry slowly beginning to ease. I don't want to lose this, she whispered. I don't want to lose you, or the family we're building, because I let fear get the better of me. Then don't, Richard said gently. Trust the people you love to handle complications with maturity and honesty. Trust Daniel and Maya to navigate their relationship the same way we're navigating ours, with care and communication. Elena nodded slowly, wiping at her eyes as a small, relieved smile finally returned to her face. You're right. I think I let my fear turn into something that wasn't fair to Daniel, or to Maya. I need to apologize to both of them. The following weekend, Elena invited Maya and Daniel over for dinner, determined to repair the distance her fear had created. The atmosphere felt tense at first as everyone settled around the table, uncertain how the evening would unfold after weeks of unspoken tension. I owe both of you an apology, Elena said once everyone had settled in. I let my fear of losing what Richard and I have built cloud my judgment. I pulled away from you, Maya, and pressured you, Daniel, to slow down something that wasn't mine to control. That wasn't fair, and I'm sorry. Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her at Elena's words, grateful for the honesty and vulnerability behind them. Thank you for saying that, she said softly. I understand why you were scared. This whole situation is unusual, and I think all of us have moments where the uncertainty feels overwhelming. I appreciate you saying sorry, Mom, Daniel added, reaching for her hand across the table. I know you're just trying to protect everyone, but we need to trust each other to handle things as they come, together, instead of trying to control outcomes out of fear. Elena nodded, squeezing her son's hand gratefully. I promise to trust that from now on. All I want is for everyone in this family to be happy, including both of you. The dinner continued with a renewed sense of warmth, the earlier tension gradually dissolving into laughter and easy conversation. Richard watched the exchange with quiet pride, grateful that honesty had once again managed to repair the fragile bonds holding their unconventional family together. But even as the evening ended on a hopeful note, Maya could not shake a lingering feeling that the true test of their family's strength still lay ahead, waiting for the moment when all four of them would need to stand together, fully, without hesitation, to prove that what they had built was truly meant to last. Months passed, and the fragile family that had formed out of an impossible coincidence slowly grew into something steady and real. Maya still remembered, with a mixture of disbelief and fondness, the night she had walked into that restaurant expecting nothing more than an ordinary blind date, never imagining it would lead her into a tangled, complicated, and ultimately beautiful new chapter of her life. Richard and Elena's relationship had only deepened since the difficult conversations of the previous months. They moved through their new life together, with a quiet confidence, no longer burdened by fear or hesitation, choosing instead to embrace the unconventional path that had brought them together. Elena often laughed about how strange it still felt, knowing that her son's girlfriend was also her partner's daughter, but the strangeness had long since transformed into something she cherished rather than feared. Maya and Daniel had grown closer too, their relationship strengthening through the challenges they had faced together. They had learned, through trial and difficulty, how to communicate honestly, how to support each other, without letting outside pressures dictate the direction of their own connection. What had begun as an awkward, impossible coincidence had become something neither of them could imagine their lives without. One crisp autumn morning, Richard called Maya, his voice carrying an unmistakable note of excitement. "Can you come by the apartment today?" he asked. "There's something I want to talk to you about." Maya arrived within the hour, curiosity buzzing through her as she rode the elevator up to her father's apartment. When she walked in, she found Richard sitting at the kitchen table, a small velvet box resting in front of him. "Dad," Maya said slowly, her eyes widening as she realized what she was looking at. "Is that what I think it is?" Richard smiled, nervous excitement radiating from him in a way Maya had not seen since before her mother passed away. "I want to ask Elena to marry me," he said, "but I wanted to talk to you first, to make sure you're truly comfortable with everything, before I take this step." Maya sat down across from her father, studying the ring box with a swirl of emotions rising within her. She thought about her mother, about the grief that still occasionally surfaced in quiet moments, about the long journey it had taken to reach this point of acceptance. But mostly, she thought about how genuinely happy her father had become since Elena entered his life, and how much that happiness meant to her. "Dad," Maya said softly, reaching across the table to take his hand, "I want you to marry her. I've watched you become yourself again over these past months, truly happy, in a way I hadn't seen in years. Elena has been nothing but kind, patient, and understanding with all of us. I think Mom would want you to be happy too." Richard's eyes glistened with emotion as he squeezed his daughter's hand tightly. "Thank you, Maya. Your support means more to me than you know." Later that week, Richard proposed to Elena during a quiet dinner at the restaurant, where they had first officially met as a family months earlier. Elena, overwhelmed with joy, said yes without hesitation, tears streaming down her face, as Richard slipped the ring onto her finger. When she called Daniel to share the news, his excitement matched her own, genuinely thrilled to see his mother finally receiving the happiness she deserved after years of hardship. The engagement brought a new wave of excitement into the family, wedding planning becoming a joyful, if occasionally chaotic, endeavor that pulled everyone closer together. Maya found herself helping Elena choose flowers and venues, the two of them growing closer through the process, their relationship evolving from cautious politeness into genuine affection and mutual respect. Daniel, meanwhile, spent more time with Richard, the two of them bonding over shared interests, and the natural closeness that came from being part of the same growing family. Richard often joked that he had gained not just a future wife, but a son as well, a sentiment that made Daniel smile every time he heard it. As the wedding date approached, Maya found herself reflecting on just how far they had all come since that chaotic, unforgettable night at the restaurant. She thought about the shock of realizing Daniel was Elena's son, the difficult conversations that followed, the fear and uncertainty that had threatened to pull everyone apart before ultimately bringing them closer together. Every challenge, she realized, had strengthened the foundation of the family they were building, teaching all of them the importance of honesty, patience, and trust. The wedding day arrived on a bright, clear afternoon in early autumn, the venue decorated with warm golden tones that matched the changing leaves outside. Maya stood beside Elena as her bridesmaid, helping her with the final touches of her dress, both of them fighting back happy tears as the ceremony approached. "Thank you for everything," Elena said, squeezing Maya's hand gently. "For accepting me. For accepting all of this, even when it must have felt overwhelming at times. Thank you for making my dad so happy," Maya replied, her voice thick with emotion. "And for being patient with all of us while we figured out how to become a family." The ceremony itself was simple but deeply moving. Richard and Elena exchanging vows that spoke of second chances, unexpected love, and the beautiful, unpredictable ways life sometimes brought people together. Maya watched from her place beside the altar, glancing occasionally at Daniel, who stood among the guests, his eyes bright with emotion, as he watched his mother marry the man who had become such an important part of both their lives. After the ceremony, during the reception, Daniel found a quiet moment to pull Maya aside, leading her toward a secluded corner of the garden, where string lights twinkled softly against the darkening sky. "Can you believe this is where we ended up?" he asked, smiling as he took her hands in his. "From an awkward blind date to standing here, watching our parents get married. I still can't believe it sometimes," Maya admitted, laughing softly. "If someone had told me that night that I'd end up falling in love with my future stepmother's son, I would have thought they were completely out of their mind." "Falling in love?" Daniel repeated, his eyebrows raising slightly, a teasing smile forming on his lips. "Is that an official declaration?" Maya felt her cheeks warm slightly, though she held his gaze steadily. "I suppose it is," she said softly. "I love you, Daniel. Despite the strangeness of how we found each other, or maybe because of it, I can't imagine my life without you in it anymore." Daniel's smile widened, warmth and love radiating from his expression as he leaned down to press a gentle kiss to her forehead. "I love you too, Maya, more than I ever expected to, especially given how our story began." They stood together under the twinkling lights, watching as Richard and Elena shared their first dance as husband and wife nearby, laughter and celebration filling the air around them. Maya felt a deep, settled happiness spreading through her chest, a feeling she had not experienced in years, not since before her mother's passing had changed everything. She thought about how strange and unpredictable life could be, how a single blind date, arranged by a well-meaning coworker, had unraveled into a story none of them could have anticipated. She thought about the fear, the uncertainty, the difficult conversations that had tested every relationship within their newly formed family, and she thought about how, despite every obstacle, they had emerged stronger, closer, and more genuinely happy than any of them could have imagined possible. As the night wore on, Maya found herself dancing alongside Daniel, surrounded by the warmth of a family built through the strangest of circumstances, yet stronger and more meaningful than she ever could have predicted. Richard caught her eye from across the room, offering a proud, loving smile that spoke volumes about how far they had come together. Elena, radiant in her wedding dress, pulled Maya into a warm embrace during a quiet moment later that evening. "Welcome to the family, officially," she said, her eyes glistening with happy tears. "I couldn't have asked for a better daughter, even if our journey to get here was more complicated than either of us expected." Maya hugged her back tightly, feeling a deep sense of belonging settle over her, one she had feared she might never experience again after losing her mother. "Welcome to the family too," she said softly. "I'm grateful every day that a simple blind date turned into something this beautiful." As the celebration continued late into the night, laughter and love filling every corner of the garden, Maya realized that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most meaningful endings. What had started as a shocking, impossible coincidence had blossomed into a family built on honesty, patience, and unwavering love, proving that even the strangest paths could lead exactly where they were always meant to go.